Доброго дня, колеги. Я надіюсь, ви мене чуєте і
Dear
бачите.
colleagues, good morning. I hope you can see me and you can hear me. It's 10 o'clock Kyiv time. And if everyone is ready, I suggest we begin the seminar. My name is Lesya Nikolaeva and I work in EU for Environment project, which is financed by the EU. And we have organized this seminar in the framework of this project. This is a series of seminars on the topic of SPP organized both by UNEP and other international organizations that support Ukraine on this path. Well, today, for the next 2 hours, we will have a very good discussion of sustainable public procurement and also new priority categories of goods, works, and services, which we offer for use, and then development of sustainability criteria during SPP. Today, we have invited very interesting presenters, participants, and those who will be sharing experiences, including international experience of introduction of SPP. But before we switch to the presentations, allow me to remind you that today, during the seminar, we plan to discuss and present the UNEP approach, the UN Environment approach towards identification of priority categories of goods, works, and services for SPP. And we want to remind you about the updated policy and changes in the legislation, which impact the development of SPP in Ukraine. And also we want to present and discuss some specific categories of goods, works, and services in the light of SPP. And we want to think and seek advice with regard to following steps for the EU for Environment project in Ukraine. This workshop was organized in cooperation with UN for Environment and the all-Ukrainian organization Żywa Planeta, the Living Planet. So allow me to invite the representative of the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Ruslan Strelets, Deputy Minister. Ruslan, over to you. Good morning, everyone. Greetings. And I'm very happy to take part in this seminar because the issue of environmentally friendly procurement, then e-labeling, environmental labeling are very important, and they are not always in the spotlight. So it's very nice to have the opportunity to launch the seminar. After Ukraine signed the EU association agreement, Ukrainian legislation has been undergoing reform towards joining the EU, and the objective of the reform process, and first and foremost, is better legislation and implementation of EU directives, which are numerous. And I'm convinced that this is a very good practice for Ukraine, for Ukrainian legislation. And we are supposed to follow this path. And also the state system of public procurement has changed. The reform of the system is still underway, and it will continue for some time. Today, the law of Ukraine on public procurement, which has been amended back in 2019, allows the procurers to procure safer and more environmentally friendly goods, works, and services. So, using this opportunity, each and every organization which is a procurer, they in fact can make a contribution towards implementation of the state environmental and climate policy. Sustainable public procurement generally means a balanced approach between environmental, social, and economic interests. In other words, the use of any additional conditions for the procured item, on one hand, has to be well justified from the standpoint of economic result, economic efficiency of such a procurement. And also, there is another important element to this. They have to justify the environmental element of this or that procurement. I took part in one of the events. We launched the operations of one of the public schools in Kyiv Oblast. That school was rehabilitated, and it was rehabilitated using the SPP principles and green procurement principles. They were procuring special construction materials, and they were selected based on the environmental criteria. And I must say that that was just one of the examples when, on one hand, you can pay a little bit more, but on the other hand, you reduce the maintenance costs and service costs. You reduce the utility costs and other resource, the cost of other resources. The cost will be way less compared to classical construction. Someone is talking at the same time. Someone's mic is unmuted. Someone's mic is unmuted. Okay, so we are talking about prevention of chronic disease, which sometimes happens within children, and the paint and varnish that was used for that construction had all the certificates supporting safe use in the establishments that are attended by children. I'm not going to talk about the greenhouse gas emissions and general impact on the environment. That is very well understood. So this kind of school in the future will be able to support the proper system of environmental management with using the green class national standard. The Ministry of Environment, by the way, is supporting by all means the introduction of this voluntary standard in partnership with the Ministry of Education and with the experts and NGOs. I want to remind everyone that the National Action Plan for Environmental Protection 2025, which was adopted by the government in May this year, it already contains numerous measures aimed at supporting numerous industries and the public procurement sphere. That is one of the KPIs which the ministry also has to fulfill. With the help of the technical assistance projects, we support our national experts and we develop new tools for the procurers, which are necessary for using environmental criteria in all different areas of production and use of the goods. The Ministry of Environment is showing the success of such kind of procurement. When the pandemic started, we had to buy laptops for our staff so that they could work from home. And in the technical specifications, when we were announcing the bidding process, one of the conditions was about compliance with environmental criteria for the computer equipment. And we are talking about e-labeling programs of type 1. And we also had certain references for the national standards for the national producers as provided in the law, or the equivalent of the standard if we're talking about offers from manufacturers from other countries. So generally, I must say that the green procurement process is being implemented very effectively and probably not very quickly, but it can help shape environmental mindset, and it can also help with establishing of a green management plan for objects, processes, and many other things where goods and services are used. And I'm sure that in the future it will happen, considering all the environmental criteria. I want to wish everybody a very successful seminar, and I am convinced that the knowledge, that the experience which you will be sharing today, it in the future will be reflected in the green public procurement process. And all of us and everyone will make his or her own contribution into the reduction of the man-made pressure on the environment, also by using environmentally friendly goods. So thank you for your attention, and I wish you very good and very effective and fruitful seminar. And I am convinced that this kind of seminars, they have to be regular and they have to expand. Thank you very much. Thank you for attention. Thank you, Ruslan. Thank you for very in-depth presentation. And thank you for being able to bring together different components of Ukrainian policies in the area of environmental protection, in the area of climate. And you also build this link to the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement. And also you added the action plan 2025. And these are very important policy documents, strategy documents, and they have an impact on the development of different tools, including the SPP tool. And then this example with the local public school is very good. It's very good example, and we want to have more examples like this. We want those examples to be more large scale, and we want those bidding processes to be more high value processes, and that is a very good example. Thank you so much. And today also we have representatives from the Ministry of Economy, from the line department of the ministry, which directly deals with policy and issues in the field of SPP. Now, allow me to invite Ms. Lilia Laktionova, who is the Department Director for Public Procurement in the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. And allow me to also thank the representatives of both ministries, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Economy, for the support of all these ideas from the very beginning of the project. And also thank you for supporting all the previous projects in the field of SPP. Lilia, are you with us? Hello, Lesa. We will have a quick switcheroo here, and I apologize for this. My name is Anna Moldasheva, and I'm a deputy of Lilia. I'm a deputy of the department head. So I'm happy to welcome all of the participants of the seminar, and I'd like to make a quick introductory remark so that we could encourage everybody for future cooperation and for the use of information and materials offered within the seminar. So once again, I must tell you that the seminar is happening under the auspices of the EU for Environment program, which is supporting SPP, environmental procurement, and environmental labeling. And it is also supported by the UN Environment. Considering the issues of today, this important topic is quite pressing. There is a new edition of the law on public procurement, and it's been already mentioned today, and it's been in effect since April 2019. So this allows the procurers to apply non-price criteria without any limits or restrictions. But at the same time, I must mention, and then the e-system is giving us evidence, that the application practice, the practice of use of those tools is not very widespread. And also before the new edition of the law become effective back in 2019, the Ministry of Economy, in cooperation with the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Economic Development, the NGBA Ukraine project, and NGOs, such as Go Local and Living Planet. So in the framework of this project that they have specifically created to support public procurement, sustainable public procurement, EU Association Lab, they have established an e-tool. It's like a constructor of non-price criteria to spread the practice of effective use of non-price criteria. So they wanted to use environmental criteria for evaluating bids during public procurement. But considering the challenges of today, the priorities have changed among the procurers, and all that requires expansion and deepening of criteria for the bidding process. So the experts of a project that aims to support green procurement in Ukraine and expansion of the practice of using sustainability criteria during procurement, all that will help the procurers and also the participants of this process, the feasibility and the opportunities and the advantages of using these criteria and also ways to apply them. Right now, we don't have a widespread practice, and that is an important process because we are laying the foundation upon which in future we will popularize this process and make it widespread. So I'd like to wish all of the participants of this meeting fruitful work, good exchange of opinions, and a lot of useful information. The information which will be helpful for the procurers who will be able to make the procurement process more effective, and the vendors will become hopefully more competitive on the SPP market. So I wish you success. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for introductory remarks. And I'd like to thank your department and the Prozoro team for very good cooperation with us. Also, within the EU for Environment program, we aim at very close cooperation with the team of Prozoro, so that, as you have mentioned, we could have good information for the procurers. That information will be posted on the website, and the procurers will be able to get all the important expert support. They will be able to work with new criteria and participate in the development of new criteria. So we are very happy to work with you and the Prozoro team to improve the technical component of the process of the e-system called Prozoro. So you have mentioned one very important obstacle which stands in the way to successful implementation of successful procurement process. Well, low level of awareness among the procurers and other participants of the bidding processes with regard to SPP. And we hope in the framework of this project, after a series of seminars and trainings, we hope that we will be able to spread the word. We will be able to raise awareness about the procedures and principles of sustainable public procurement, and that will help the procurers and the vendors to have a better picture about SPP. Thank you very much. Now, we also have a representative from the Parliamentary Committee responsible for environmental policy and use of natural resources, Alexander Marikovsky, MP, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, and the Deputy Chairman of the committee. He will tell us more about the SPP and the stance with regard to SPP in the environmental policy and climate change policy of Ukraine. Alexander, over to you. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, dear participants of the seminar. I hope that my internet connection will be good enough. But if it's not good enough, let me know. I will be using audio instead of video because it eats up a lot of bandwidth. Okay, so please continue. We will tell you if it's breaking up. Okay, so Ukraine already is making its contribution into the establishment of a climate-neutral European continent. We're talking about the Paris Accord, and Alexander is breaking up. So we are talking about the implementation of the Green Deal and its objectives. And it's a logical continuation of the efforts of greening of the economy. One of the effective tools is the sustainable approach in public procurement. And Alexander is breaking up now.
в різних формах закупівлі і через тендер палату раніше. І
Unfortunately,
стало питання, як змінити оцей вузький
sound is interrupting.
до закупівель.
So the task was how to change the approach to
Економного використання державних
procurement and as means of efficient use of
цей
public
зміни цього
budget and
досить непроста.
make it more strategic. And this reorientation is quite difficult. For example, for business, green transformation was justified and was long expected, and there were regulations on the protection of environment and atmospheric air and quick development of green markets. Also, public procurement, which is now 14% of GDP of the country, can play an important role in achieving considerable state targets in public procurement, because it can become sort of drivers for them. So further enhancing of green requirements in public procurement, I would like to single out certain sectors and groups of goods and services which have the highest environmental impact. So enhancing the environmental requirements will be able to achieve better results to reduce impact on environment and people's health, because this target for our committee is decisive. So our committee and our topic is prevention of impact on environment and which implies better health for our nations. And the clients can form the tendencies which are observed in international green markets, and it should be introduced via Prozoro platform, so that the businesses could plan in advance organization of their production processes and upgrading those processes and incorporating those tendencies and future change of legislation in order not to lose their markets, because we know that the EU is constantly enhancing the requirements to the production. And as we know that we are orienting our experts to the EU market, we have to comply with those requirements. The earlier Ukraine starts the process of preparing the clients and participants to those market participants to those processes, the easier they will be introduced. So I fully support this workshop. European and international practice play an important role in developing sustainable practices, procurement, and introduction of voluntary standards, marking and explanations for clients, and developing of standard specifications and contracts, and summarizing of international practices. And the demand for something new without appropriate knowledge and control from the side of the government can encourage the development of unfair competition. And in our country, it can be widely spread. I'm personally, in terms of for the current procurement law, I submitted the amendment, draft amendment, which changes the criteria for procuring according to environmental standard, because there are a lot of complaints about the procurement law, public procurement law, and Prozoro system, because the quality was not a component in that, and all bidders were oriented towards a lower price, which did not encourage development of green technologies. So now, with this amendment, it can also incorporate the possibility for green technology development. And this draft amendment also includes national accreditation in national laboratory or assessment of compliance with the criteria, and they have to provide a protocol or opinion or certificate, and take measures to avoid greening. So if that amendment is accepted, we will be able to provide it according to standard with appropriate laboratories in Ukraine. Unfortunately, providing of documents which are not confirmed, we still have that, but our next step is improvement of legislation in terms of rules of applying environmental marking and declaration, and statistical reports on assessment of the capacity of environmental products, and state support of producers to produce more environmentally friendly products. I believe this has to be the highest priority for the state to develop such production, because such products will be exported for a long time in the future. This should be for SMEs, because as we are modernizing our economy, we understand that we have to focus on improvement of SMEs. And I'm confident that with the support of the EU for Environment project, we will prepare amendments to the legislation this year. With regard to our committee, we are always open for cooperation with all the projects which support environmental amendments, which have the aim to improve the environment and our life standards. I'm personally grateful for your attention, and wish you a good working at this workshop today. Thank you, Mr. Alexander, for this support, words of support from the part of the Environmental Committee of the Parliament. And in your speech, you mentioned, you touched upon very important issues. In a nutshell, you explained why sustainable public procurement is important, especially for SMEs, taking into consideration that the Ukrainian market is targeted at cooperation with the European market, and requirements to environmental requirements to goods and services, which we can provide internationally. These requirements are being enhanced and more rigorous. So for our businesses, for our enterprises, it's important to get prepared to those conditions, and they should be able to propose more environmentally friendly products with less impact on environment and climate change. And as we logically approached this topic of support from the side of the European Union, of our country, on the way of modernizing the economy and novelties in production and technology, I would like to invite Mrs. Olga Simak, head of the sector on environmental issues of the European Union Representative Office in Ukraine, which is directly financing this product, the EU for Environment, and also supports the reform of various sectors of Ukraine's economy and various areas of environmental development in the country. So, Olga, if you're here, the floor is yours. A good summer morning to everyone. With great pleasure, I take part in this seminar, and I'm very grateful when UNEP and the partners are inviting us. And after what I've heard, I would like to thank the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Economy and the Parliamentary Committee on Environmental Policy for this active participation in our project, EU for Environment activities, and this is really inspiring. I would like to agree with Mr. Deputy Minister of Environment that today's topic is very important, and for me it implies practical steps to expedite the development of the sustainable technologies, and this is also the focus of European Green Deal, providing the consumers the possibility to choose. And it's about also improving our life quality in a better environment. Because me as a consumer, I would like to know whether the producer of the goods or services which I want to purchase is caring about environment. And as a citizen of the country who pays taxes, I would like to be confident that the government spends this money with a care for environment. In addition, I would like to mention that today's topic is also about new opportunities for business. I would like to emphasize the word opportunities, because unfortunately now in Ukraine, everything related to environmental protection for some reason is not popular. We want to focus on price, but that does not incorporate the negative impact on environment and our investment in the future. And both sides are suffering, those who are selling and who are buying. Environmental requirements and norms are usually perceived as barriers on the way of economic development, and the parliament was despite the support of the European Union and the Ministry of Environment and the Committee of the Parliament on Environmental Policy, those important draft laws which were submitted to the Parliament last week were not adopted. Unfortunately, the big businesses and the politicians do not want to look wider and appreciate those possibilities which we have for environment and the economy as in general for the country. So I agree with the previous speakers. That continuous discussion and of practical aspects of implementation of the European agreement and provisions on the environmental protection. I really hope that this discussion will lead to the advantages of sustainable development will be better understood also from an economic standpoint, and will gather better support. In the EU, the green development is the priority, and the EU is the leader, as we see in pursuing the agenda of the green economy and eco marking, is being has been used for a long time, and it's used for goods and services which comply with high environmental standards. And those environmental standards have to be implemented during the whole life cycle of those products, starting from the raw materials to recycling. And this helps circular economy and encourages producers to produce less waste, CO2, and to develop such products which will be longer used and which can be repaired easier and recycled. And the advantages will be for both for consumers and businesses, because businesses will have better opportunities for growth. With regard to public procurement in the EU, they're also at the level of 14% of the GDP, and it's quite a big share. Mr. Markovsky mentioned the same figure for Ukraine. That's why public procurement is part of the European Green Deal, because in the EU they understand that public procurement can be used as a means for successful implementation of this new Green Deal agenda. The circular economy and environmental industrial strategy and in biodiversity strategy, which are components of this Green Deal, they acknowledge that the governmental authorities can make a important contribution to production and consumption using their authorities by giving right signals, which were also mentioned in the previous speeches. But what's important that these documents also envisage that the EU plans to switch from a voluntary application of green procurement to compulsory minimum criteria. So the EU is moving forward, but they emphasize that no additional barriers will be created for business. The EU is happy to share the successful experience in these areas, and the project EU for Environment helps that the issue of sustainable public procurement and eco-marking is also topical for Ukraine. A lot is being done, and I was glad to hear about that. So this is an urgent issue because Ukraine has proved its interest to green transformation. The EU supports this wish of Ukraine, but also it anticipates from our country the appropriate level of climate ambition. So in this context, we have to expedite the implementation of those EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, also in the sphere of environment, public procurement, and competition. This is very important. In Ukraine, the EU started to support sustainable public procurement back in 2013 via EIP Green program. Now we're happy to see this progress and the further information and raising awareness about among clients in applying this law is very important and will help to move forward quicker and avoid mistakes. So I'll wrap up on that. I would not like to take much of the time of this event, so I wish a successful discussion. And on behalf of the European EU Representative Office, we're glad that this work is supported and financed by the EU. I wish you good workshop today. Thank you, Mrs. Olga. You shared this interesting information, especially about the attitude of the EU countries to sustainable public procurement, to eco-marking, and it's quite an interesting tendency which is observed, as you mentioned, of transition from voluntary basis for defining sustainability of procurement to mandatory ones. So this tendency will be also observed internationally, because this is linked to environmental policy. And I would like to share and inform business about these possibilities, because without business we're just like guardians of the environment, but we are not supporting or contribute to green modernization of economy. And Ukraine has taken this path of greening the economy, and via our project EU Environment and AP Green, we are happy to support this tool of sustainable public procurement. Thank you for your support. Now I would like to invite my colleague, Farid Yeker, the officer of the UN, UNEP. This branch is situated in Paris, and Farid has a long-standing experience in cooperating with Ukraine, as UNEP developed this method for sustainable public procurement in 2013. Farid was one of the founders of this approach, and within the framework of EU for Environment and the previous project AP Green, he was able to work with Ukraine. So Farid, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lesia, and really, I'm really pleased to be here today. As you said, we've been active in Ukraine for a long time, and it's a pleasure to see the progress which has been achieved in the country. I can see the change compared to 8 years ago, when we used to meet in the Ministry of Environment with the State Ecological Academy. I see that there are many more ministries that are around the table, and they're present today, the key ministries that really matter for sustainable procurement. I saw the progress of interest of cooperation agencies also for the subject. The World Bank had its first project in the world together with Albania on sustainable procurement over the last 2 years. We had the GIZ, we had of course UNEP supported project that the EU supported, EAP Green, and then EU for Environment. So all this shows that really there is an interest not only on the subject but also on supporting Ukraine, because Ukraine is mobilized to ensure the success of sustainable procurement. And it showed it by really walking the talk. We heard about the progress of the legal framework. We know that Prozoro also is making made more conducive to SPP. We had selection of priority products. I will come back to that later. So I can see that SPP is really becoming a reality, and your presence today, the numerous presence of procurers, of practitioners, of policymakers really attest to that. So I'm telling you, you're not really in the wrong webinar, you're in the right webinar today, because it's an important topic. As was said earlier, we need to send the right signal to the market. We have to transform the market because the situation is bad. We have to admit it. We haven't made progress over the last 30, 50 years. Things have worsened. They have worsened in terms of climate. We've witnessed the terrible events that happened in Belgium and Germany the last week. The death toll, which is horrible in an industrialist country, in a developed country. We have witnessed what happened in the northwest of North America with the heat wave. So climate change is becoming a reality. The biodiversity loss is a reality. Pollution is a reality. So the only way we can reverse those trends is really to make sure that our consumption does not impact negatively the environment. And now we reverse trends with a positive impact on the planet and on the environment. So consumption is at the heart of the matter, because what we buy, everything we buy has an impact on the planet. If we buy a good which consumes a lot of energy. For example, this electricity is made with coal. We are going to contribute highly to climate warming. If we use electricity which is renewable, we really reduce this impact. If we recycle, if we put in place circular economy, then if we have a take-back policy, for example, to return the goods we're purchasing, we're going to reduce also the negative impact, the impact on resources, on the planet, etc. So you're at the heart of the issues today. And that's why we believe that prioritization is important, because we are going to select the goods and services that are going to be the less impactful on the planet and the resources. This is the topic of discussion today. What are the goods that we're going to introduce in priority in the public procurement system? Why are we going to work more on vehicles or on paints or on IT products? This is what we're going to discuss today. So if you allow me, Lesia, I can move now to the presentation, having made this transition. Before that, I would like to thank the interpreters for really an excellent job so far. And I'm sure it's going to be the same until the end.
Так, дякую. Будь ласка, Фарід, продовжуйте щодо представлення.
Okay, please continue with your presentation with regard to sustainable procurement, and also we'd love to hear about the benefits of sustainable practices and sustainable procurement. Thank you.
Do you have the presentation on the screen? Okay, great. Okay, you mentioned that, Lesia, that we developed an approach, which is a methodology that we inherited from an international task force led by Switzerland and the UK. And we're going to revise our first guidelines. In 2 months, you will receive the revised document publication based on lessons learned from the work we did over the last 10 years. So here on the screen, you can see a summary of our methodology. Here you can see that we really try to understand what is the situation. We call that status assessment. We work on the legal aspects. This is being done so far in Ukraine. And to the right, you see a blue block, which is really what we are discussing today. We need to prioritize. We cannot work on all the products at the same time. And this has been done also in connection with the market. We have to make sure that the market can supply those goods at the right price and with the right sustainability criteria. So this is the topic of today. And based on that, we're going to select priority products and develop procurement guidelines, because what you're interested in is the guidelines. You know, you want to be told what are the criteria, the specs, technical specifications you should be using, award criteria, how you should be managing the contract with those new products. So this is the final goal of this exercise. And this, in many countries, feeds what we call an SPP policy and action plan, which is then implemented. You can find the information here. We will share with you the presentation so that you have the links. This is something, and it was said earlier by the EU representative, that is being done by everyone that does GPP and SPP. The EU is the first one. Here you see the 4 first categories, but they have 16 more. There is 20 categories of products prioritized by the EU. And you heard the CIMA said that the EU is moving towards now more mandatory procurement with criteria, minimum criteria that will be mandatory in the future. So in the first time, and at the beginning, we had a voluntary approach. Now we're moving more towards a mandatory approach, which is already the case in Asia. And many countries, you know, have prioritized. Here you can see the list of products that were prioritized. You can see that in Ukraine, at the top, This is what this was the result of the fair prioritization exercise we conducted from 2013 to 2017. Then Ukraine, and I said it, received support from GIZ, and based on that, 12 other products were prioritized. You have them on the screen together with in collaboration between Go Local, Living Planet, and various ministries. So this was really a joint effort. So this work we do, of course, not only in Ukraine, but in the whole world. Here you can see on the screen the range of our support. And right now, we're really active in Georgia, in Kyrgyzstan, in Kazakhstan, in the region, in addition to a number of other countries, India, Latin America, etc. And so I'm going to go now more into to how we operate, we conduct the prioritization. So our objective is really to take into account, and we said it, because we want to make an impact, we have to look at the risks of consuming certain goods and services. So we are going to assess the risks, but we have to take into account also the priorities of the administration. Do we want to focus more on climate or on biodiversity or on saving resources? Do we want to look at the social aspect? So this also will orient our choices. Okay, we have to see also if we have a great scope for action. When you move from incandescent lighting to LED lighting, you can make a huge difference. So you have to see also what are the alternatives that exist in the market that allow you to make this shift and to make an impact. And also, obviously, the market capacity. Will the market be able to provide those new goods? So we go over 7 steps, which you have on the screen. We start with the long list. Then we look at the purchasing, the volumes, and the value of the contracts. Are we talking about a category which is really purchased in high volumes, or it's a small category? Then we also look very early enough at the market, because we have to make sure that the market will be able to provide the goods at the right price. So the objective here is to reduce the number of initial products. We eliminate a certain number of products which are not provided by the market, which are not purchased in great volumes, so that we end up with what we call a shortlist. When we have the shortlist, then we can apply the risks and benefits assessment. We're going to look at the environmental impacts, socioeconomic impacts. If we have certification schemes, can we verify the sustainability attributes? And all the scores from all these steps will be included in a master table so that we can select the final categories for SPP. So here you can see from A to F, all the criteria we use. So A is about the volumes, B is about the average price of the difference, what we call the premium, which is difference between the conventional product and the more sustainable product. We look also at the market availability. D is about the environmental impact, E about the social impact, F is about the existence of eco-labels or certification schemes. And then we are able to have a final table, which I have here. With the last column, you see final ranking. We have selected first sanitary cleaners, copying paper, and 3 is drinks and beverages. The example of Vietnam, where you see that the ranking is from printing paper to public lighting, from 1 to 11. Once we have done this, we do a more thorough market analysis. We did a very preliminary analysis to check if the goods were on the market, if the prices were not too different. But then now we have to go and dig deeper into the market, really to assess to determine really the criteria that we are going to use in procurement. the level of stringency of the criteria, because we have to adapt our procurement, the types of goods and the specifications we are going to request to the market. So the objective here will be really to assess the production capacity, to determine the market's capacity to respond to SPP, to identify existing certification of and verification tools, to assist in the planning of activities for gradual implementation of SPP. We have to make sure also that we're not going to displace local production with imports, that it's going to benefit the national economy. So the outcomes will be then we are going to identify and secure our choice of products and service. We're going to know the production versus import outlook. It was said earlier, the role that micro or SMEs will play in the production import of the sustainable goods. We're going to detect measures, projects, in policies that are going to sustain and support our SPP policy, for example, on sustainable consumption and production in fiscal area, in the area of circular economy, etc. We're going to connect with other policies. We're going to raise awareness among the productive sector in the business so that they really understand that there's going to be a new market signal and they get ready to change either the production processes or then switch to new products. And in the end, we're going to define the criteria for sustainable public procurement. This means the technical specifications, the award criteria, the selection criteria, the contract management, etc. So then we should be able to in most countries, define what are the priority products and then draft those procurement guidelines that are going the tool that procurers are going to use in their day-to-day procurement. In our action plan, then the idea, the project, the purpose is really to get a commitment to apply SPP, to coordinate the action, to be able to monitor, to improve the dialogue with markets, with market and civil society. All countries also that are really implementing SPP or GPP, they define those plans, 5-year plans, and they put them into action. And sometimes they have 2-3 action plans already since they started maybe 15-20 years ago. So again, we're going to look at the legal framework. The institutional framework is important. We have to know who will be in charge of the champion of SPP, which ministry will lead, supported by which ministry. We're going to, SPP implementation will mean what are the priority products, what are the criteria that were selected. Capacity building is very important, communication strategy, monitoring, and budget. I want to finish with telling you how are things going at world level. Maybe some of you heard about the Sustainable Development Goals, the development agenda. The international community picked 17 goals that have to be prioritized by 2030 to really reverse the negative trends and improve the sustainability of the planet on the economic, environmental, and social fronts. And we have 169 targets. Those 17 goals have 169 targets, and one of them is on sustainable procurement. The goal 12 on responsible consumption and production has a specific target on sustainable procurement that you can see here on the screen. The idea is to promote public procurement practices that are sustainable, and the indicator is the number of countries implementing sustainable public procurement policies and action plans. We have done, UNEP is in the custodian of this target, so we developed the methodology. We did the first data collection exercise last year, or beginning of this year actually, and we found that 40 countries submitted then their reports. They then filled the calculator for the indicator. And we received also submission from subnational governments who submitted then the reports. It was split between Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Finance and Public Procurement Authority. You see that these were the major submitters. And the results were the following. We had 7 countries that had insufficient result, but we had 24, 33 countries that passed the first data collection exercise that are complying with the indicator. 10 of them were found to be at a low level, medium low 14 countries, and then we found also 9 countries that are the most advanced in SPP implementation, and we hope that soon Ukraine will join this group of countries. Apologize to having been a bit too long, but I'm available to respond to questions, and of course I'll be following the workshop very attentively. Thank you.
Дякуємо, Фарід, за презентацію. І як ви вже зрозуміли, ми
Thank you, Farid, for presentation. And as you understood, we started part section of our topical presentations. I would like to invite the participants, and there are 92 of us at the moment. Should you have any questions about presentations, please ask your questions in the chat, and at the end we'll have a short Q&A session to answer all your questions. Also, I hope that our colleagues in the chat will be able to share their presentations. And for the next hour, we will have interesting presentations from our expert team of the Ukraine's national, all Ukraine's organizations, Life Planet, and the National Technical Committee on Standardization, number 82 on environmental protection. And in advance, I would like to request the representatives to be as laconic as possible, but provide comprehensive information at the same time for us to fit within this 1 hour period. I would like to invite Svetlana Berezina. Sorry, Svetlana. Your position is President of all Ukraine's organization Life Planet, who will present us briefly on the process of identifying new categories of goods, services, and products for SPP. Good morning, Lesa. I have some difficulty here. Yes, we finished with Farid's screen. Now I'm opening the presentation. Thank you. I would like to thank everyone. In the very beginning, I would like to thank once again everyone who helped in organizing this seminar, Minister of Environment, Minister of Economy. Thank you for information support, and we have good attendance, taking into consideration the fact that now it's a vacation period. So I will start with the presentation of our research, based on which today we will propose new categories of goods, services for SPP in Ukraine, and the actions which we are planning for the future to develop within the project. First of all, the idea of this survey was to assess new challenges, political changes, and economic, environmental, and social aspects, and the legislation which was changed within the past year and a half, starting from 2020, as we conducted similar analysis for the period for 2018 and 2019. With regard to prioritization of the environmental sectors, the research was conducted, which allowed us to prioritize certain areas, certain sectors. The survey under the new project, which we will present today, I will share in a nutshell the methodology. It can be characterized like step by step. We analyzed the surveys for the previous period in this year and a half. There are many changes at political level and at the national legislation level. There were adopted and repealed new standards. analysis of market was conducted, which is changing dynamically, particularly in terms of organic products, environmental products, especially with regard to imported products, which are considered more environmentally friendly. And our survey comprises the opinions of stakeholders. In June, we had a survey where 300 people participated, mostly they are clients and suppliers. And today, in the framework of this workshop, we will conduct a survey, but we will start in the second part. As I mentioned earlier, the previous surveys we incorporated, and we have a list of those on the screen. In order not to duplicate, we have used which was already done at appropriate level using the method UNEP, which was presented by Farid, which we started using it back in 2014 in App Green project, but it was modified in the course of time, and we've used its improved version, which was provided by our partners from UNEP. The methodology which we used envisaged all these 6 steps which we passed with a focus starting from updated national policies and initiatives. So these are quickly developing now. Then upgraded legislation, which has been adopted, and preliminary we evaluate the potential of those draft laws adoption, which passed first reading, and the methodological recommendations, which of those things which were already adopted by the Ministry of Economic Development, the potential of the cost of living. In June, there was amendment to the law. This was related to the lack of appropriate methodology related to certain categories of goods, works, and services, despite the fact that the Ministry of Economy developed the general methodology to assess the cost of the life cycle cost. But any category requires individual approach. So having this legislative possibility, which is defined in the law, and the possibility which is provides the client the possibility to assess based on the life cycle cost. This was not methodologically prepared to use unified approach. So in the framework of the project, we propose to use this approach, but with regard to the correction via non-price criteria. This will be related mostly to works and services. Of course, having analyzed various goods and services in terms of their priority for Ukraine as products related to use of this SPP approach, we analyzed the technical reports and the information base of the EU Commission, which includes those criteria which Farid mentioned. But in addition to those 20 criteria which are proposed by the European Commission as the recommended criteria for sustainability and justification of appropriateness of use those criteria. This is a very important moment, this justification of criteria and verification. So the verification of compliance. I would like to note that in the EU territory, there are regional and national programs for environmental marking, and these are quite branched out. They have over 100 criteria for various goods and services. For example, environment program for environmental marking of Scandinavian countries. 27 items are covered by the EU program. So we also considered this criteria basis of the EU program. EU Commission recommends to use those marking programs which are acknowledged internationally, and by those agencies which were accredited or proved their qualification. This is a very important amendment to this new law, which Alexander Markovsky mentioned, which allows to get rid of the papers which were issued by non-competent organizations, various unions and NGOs, regarding the compliance with certain marking or standards, but at the same time they didn't have any proof of their competence to provide such papers. So now the law requires the client to consider only those documents which are issued by the authorities which have proved their competence. Also, in the course of survey, we of course used the information from other TA projects. This is the World Bank project and GIZ project, which are active in the energy efficient public procurement. So this project develops criteria from the standpoint of energy efficiency for wall structures or buildings for construction materials which provide improved energy efficiency of buildings and energy intense energy dependent devices. So the products related to technical regulation on eco design. Sources of information. Unlike the project which was, or survey which was conducted with under UpGreen project, in this season we have a very good supporter. It's a public module in BI Prozoro, and the specialists passed appropriate training and are able to operate data of Prozoro system quite in depth, which enabled us to analyze the volumes of procurement and frequency of procurement of those goods, which were considered as the priorities. And my colleague Alena Tkash will explain in more detail about it. She's an expert in the project, and I will continue about that in the next presentation. We also conducted the market survey. This was quite comprehensive. For that, we used our partners' links with big retail networks like Metro Cash and Carry. Also, we used available publicly data like internet shops, Prom.ua and Rosetka to analyze the prices and affordability of prices, which we can use as prioritized categories to define criteria of sustainability. And of course, we have analyzed the Prozoro market data. This is a new platform, new tool for the procurement, and procurers can use without tender those products which are available at Prozoro market. And of course, we are analyzing the real price of goods, works, and services in the Prozoro system, which is accessible and open. It's a quite interesting survey about availability on the market of this or that kind of goods which are complying with the standards. And that will be demonstrated by my colleague Galina Buzak, also an expert of the project. Also, regarding the market volume for environmentally friendly goods and services. This is the wording which is used by international 1424 ISO standard, the goods which can be marked as environmental, and it shows its advantages as an environmental product. With regard to various programs like EU and others, which are acknowledged internationally via independent audit, which is conducted by the international network. This is based on a global website. We can analyze those programs and registers which they maintain about issued certificates and products. Ukrainian program is this is Green Crane. This also has international accreditation and passed successfully international certification back in 2010. So having analyzed the data from this program, so we can judge about the volume of green markets on this or that category, to consider the possibility to provide to sell these products in the Ukraine's market. Also, we have analyzed the registries of the systems of certification FCS, FSC. I'd like to know that in Ukraine we have only products which are complying with the regulation of EU on organic products and organic production. Ukraine's system of certification is at the stage of implementation, and we anticipate that about half year or 1 year and it will become operational. But what is developing the organic product market is developing quite quickly, which comply with the European regulation. And there are 18 authorities which have European accreditation, provide certification services. The information we get from the data of those organizations. They're in the registry of the Ministry of Economy, and these activities are conducted according in compliance with the law on organic products. Experts know, as they're experienced, they know how to use this. They have knowledge about various standards related to sustainable development. So, in fact, we are finalizing the analysis of market readiness, and today we will demonstrate these results today. So this is the methodology, and step by step, the priority sectors and categories of products, we are narrowing those down to identify the most priority ones, because the categories of goods and services which are purchased via Prozora 1000, there are certain restrictions in terms of the prices and time. So we have to focus on the most important ones, taking into consideration which is being done under other projects and which criteria have the highest potential to improve the impact on the environment and to improve safety indicators, improve impact on humans' health or users' health when using this or that product. So thank you for your attention. Thank you, Svetlana, for your presentation. I would like to thank you and the whole team of Life Planet for your expert support and this comprehensively prepared work in environment and Life Planet is a reliable partner of UNEP in implementing activities on SPP. Let me invite Elena Tkach, also expert of the project, who will tell us about the political and economic conditions to determine new priority categories of goods and services for SPP. So, Elena, if 20 minutes will be sufficient for you, we'll be grateful. Yes, good morning, everyone. I will try to do so. I will focus on those issues which were not highlighted in the previous presentations. I would like to mention, and I would like I'll try to give you practical examples. Despite economic and social losses because of military aggression against Ukraine and negative impact of consequences of COVID-19, I would like to know that Ukraine has a potential of development thanks to its natural resources, geographical position, and quality of human capital. Ukraine has 5% of the world's mineral resources deposits and ranks number 9 according to the area of forests and supply, and number 6 on wood supply. But outdated approaches to managing natural resources result in its depletion, and approximation of the European tools for approaching markets.
Затвердження національних стандартів і встановлення вимог до якості готової продукції,
All this, that includes low potential of modern technologies and modern processes, all that leaves Ukraine as just a supplier of raw material outside Ukraine. Then the man-made waste as a resource is underestimated by Ukrainian companies. Allow me to show some practical examples. Now, speaking about ash, bank ash is millions of tons and hundreds of millions of tons of accumulated steelmaking ash. All this resource can be used in repair, road repair, and in construction. And every year, we have an increase in the production of mineral resources. That means depletion of those deposits. So we have to use some regulatory leverage to start using ash in road making and in all kinds of construction works. And speaking about fly ash, it can be used in making of concrete, thermal isolation, cement, cinder block, abrasive materials, foam concrete, roofing materials, and so on. We already have examples of good regulation. For example, the adopted guidelines on the use of environmental protection measures, and also non-pricing criteria that can apply to construction works and road repair. All those things already allow our country to use this important criteria. And we have some success stories with regard to construction material. Kovalska industrial group already is using this in their products, and also cement makers. Dickendorf, Heidelberg Cement Ukraine, Ivano-Frankivsk Cement, all those companies already use this new technologies. And ash generally can be used widely in that kind of production. We just need political will for this. And also some joint efforts between the government and businesses. Also, there are some disadvantages with regard to this approach, because we can see that the export of these items has been decreasing by 1.7. And at the same time, there is an increase in the export of raw material, the mineral products, ash, as I already said. And speaking about import, we have a similar picture. So on one hand, the import of goods and services is kind of reducing by 12%, but we have already import of finished product, which is increasing. And what is significant? We are talking about $45 million worth of those kind of products. At the same time, I must mention that the state can boost investment into the green products through non-price criteria, and that will have an impact on forest use and water use and resource efficiency. national, political, and economic priorities, as you can see, they correspond with the sustainable development goals and priorities of the country. And also, they are supported by the priority of spending, as mentioned in the national budget for 2021 in several areas mentioned on the slide, which, of course, are not exhaustive. So we are talking about reduction of greenhouse gases. We are talking about digitalization and development of the regions. So the volume of public procurement annually amounts to 13% approximately, and this number is growing. And because of that, the state has a significant impact on the market. They can channel this market towards innovative development by stepping up environmental responsibility of business and transition to the green economy approach or the model. As we can see from all this planned expenditure, the construction is in the priority list. And we are talking about counteraction of climate change, and also we are talking about introduction of innovations, which is support the decentralization process. Now, speaking about international commitments of Ukraine, as already been mentioned, we already have certain progress with regard to the association agreement and the Green Deal. But at the same time, I want to draw your attention to WTO. Right now, 46 WTO members take part in the negotiations on the WTO environmental plan. And while they work on this agreement, Ukraine needs to be part of the working group. And that's how we can add our list of priority items, which can help prioritize things and impact our country on the prioritization process for industries, for categories of goods based on their national interest. Now, speaking about the association agreements, there is already some progress with regard to removal of technical barriers to trade and public procurement, and the government will continue supporting the reform of decentralization, digitalization, and also allow me to mention some practical examples, which I like very much. The supplier, the vendor, will be providing e-reference to different documents, thus confirming all the compliance with all the requirements. And they will also confirm authenticity of these documents through the open registers. Besides, they have established processes for food safety and counteraction of climate change. Now, speaking about the waste management reform, in line with the association agreement, this reform requires more awareness raising among businesses, because in spite of presidential support and parliamentary support and support from government, there is a serious opposition from the polluting entities. However, this specific area is very promising, and it can actually impact establishment of a new sustainable market of waste management and shaping the demand for waste as a resource. And considering the state support and the donor funding, we have to launch awareness-raising campaign among businesses. We have to organize some seminars with regard to adoption of certain methodologies and implementation of those methodologies. So we're talking about very important things. We have to focus the expert support on future assistance in approximation. Now, speaking about the Green Deal, in the context of SPP, we have good consensus. There is the support from the president and EU recommendations and recommendations of the Ukraine-Europe Advisory Group in the context of the economic dimension. So they all recommend to step up efforts for approximation and facilitation of trade in environmentally friendly goods, support to SPP, introduction of environmentally friendly technologies, and also stepping up responsibility for waste management and the system of classification and labeling. This approach is used in the life cycle management system. Svetlana already mentioned this. And this all is done with the purpose of attaining the objectives and management of environmental aspects and so on. Now, speaking about the analysis of regulatory framework, I'm gonna just discuss some things which are very important, things which have not been mentioned by the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Economy. The National Economic Strategy 2030 is the foundation for shaping up competitive conditions so that we could be competitive at the global market and attraction of investment. And at the same time, it includes many different sectors which match priority areas from the national budget and priority areas in the national legislation. We're talking about construction, we're talking about industrial construction, housing, then food products, then sustainable waste management and chemicals, then sustainable urban planning and sustainable management of timber, and also digitalization of public services, greening of the infrastructure, green cities, smart cities, and development of SMEs. We are talking about transformation. We're talking about highly productive sectors of economy, which will be able to effectively compete with other states. And this will facilitate additional growth in revenue. This is a vision which is supported at the highest level of the state. And the Ukraine 30 Forum is a good evidence to the support. The president takes part in monthly meetings to discuss different sectors of economy, and they invite national or international experts to this meeting. They invite business representatives, and they discuss strategic and legislative initiatives. The national policy has been in effect since 2020, and it already introduced some environmental norms and standards in public administration, and also it's another way to address the greening of the economy. Then there is the National Action Plan 2025, and it steps up the capacity for introduction of green public procurement. But at the same time, I must mention, and by the way, it takes into account all the measures proposed by the youth environment projects. But at the same time, I must mention that it does not contain any reference to state programs for funding of such measures. That means that the implementation will be supported by the actors or at the cost of the TA projects. Now, speaking about the updated legislation, in the construction area, we are talking about simplified procedure for receiving licenses and permits. Then we're talking about budget funding for specific works and services, and also it allows to procure some specific components. And also we are talking about a revolutionary innovation when we import goods. We're talking about construction goods and items. They must be in compliance with international standards. We are talking about the 305 regulation of the EU. So speaking about the wood processing, sustainable wood processing. So we have been introducing the monitoring process. We have been introducing different regulations and oversight over compliance with the standards for internal consumption of the domestic timber, and also e-registration of timber. So this area, the construction sector, and all the adjacent works and services, along with use of subsoil and related works and services, all that demands a proportional approach towards use of timber, production of timber, plastic, and hence that means that we have to have criteria for these specific products in the above mentioned areas for bidding purposes. And at the same time, we have a related demand for criteria for processing of the above mentioned items. Speaking about the reform in waste management and in management of hazardous chemicals, this reform will require reform in regulations, including technical regulations, standards, methodologies with regard to hazardous chemicals, containers, biocide products, antiseptics, disinfectants, different chemical pollutants, equipment that contains polychlorophenol, and also after the legislative change, which has been mentioned by our colleague MP before, we are talking about electronic, electric equipment, batteries, and in the process of implementation of the reform, we will have to adopt a series of criteria for the above-mentioned goods and related services. Speaking about innovations in the law on public procurement, it's been already mentioned, by the way, the key advantages of that. And some bylaws have been adopted, which allow to further develop environmentally friendly procurement, and also to expand the list of items which can be procured through the central procurement agencies. And also there are other legal acts on your screen which specify specific requirements for bidding documents, and they introduce new methodology of identification of the life cycle cost, which can be used during public procurement by the procurers. Now, speaking about the types of public procurements, all that's been analyzed and the costs were analyzed as well. So with the purpose of time saving, I'd like to summarize the legislative innovations that address the expansion of the procurement area, the information that's entered into the system, into the procurement system, has increased. And we're talking about more bidding processes, more high-value bids, and also we can conclude, speaking about the procurement procedure, that it's important to view the criteria development process considering the demand in the procedure and the competitive process. Now, speaking about the guidelines and methodology with regard to standards, we already have certain change in the mentioned sectors that you can see on the screen. And also, I must say that the biggest progress we observe in the food safety and catering services. Speaking about waste management, we already see certain progress, and that covers detergents, that also covers the methodology for recycling of medical waste, and also volatile organic substances. Speaking about stakeholders, it's been already mentioned in depth that we don't have any serious change in this regard, but considering the latest legislative change and considering the digitalization process in the economy, all of the participants, all of the stakeholders and their cooperation has to be viewed as a single ecosystem of stakeholders, which conditionally can be brought together into the scheme. I'm not gonna discuss too much the stakeholders, but I'm just gonna say that there is a trend towards digitalization. And also there is a trend for increasing awareness raising with regard to the advantages of the e-system for public procurement. And also controlling auditing entities have new powers. There are laws and regulations for that. And the Anti-Monopoly Committee remains the body of appeal in the field of competition. The body of appeal and compliance with regard to competition legislation. The procurers and the vendors, they have to focus on the powers of the national police that can be utilized in this regard, because in the previous periods of time, police was very rarely used for this purpose. Already police has certain tools, certain approaches with regard to regulating some gaps. Now, speaking about cooperation between stakeholders, cooperation between government agencies is taking place in line with national legislation. Speaking about other participants, we use competitive dialogue, we use preliminary market consultations, and I must say that one of the methods of introducing clarity into the cooperation between the vendors and the procurers is the arbitration, and we can already develop under this project the criteria of sustainability in the system of public procurement. Also, at the same time, we have established a steering committee for the TA projects and stakeholders from TA projects and the procurement department. Speaking about the World Bank, they coordinate activity with regard to green procurement and sustainable procurement. And after the projects expire, we will decide what to do next. Now, speaking about the survey results, which already been mentioned, a large-scale survey generally, all of the participants unanimously talk about change. They do notice change. Speaking about the key problems of procurers, mostly they see these problems during the preparation of documents. Similar problems are faced by the vendors, but additionally, vendors have some concerns with regard to lack of good competition. Sometimes new companies are not let to participate in the market or in the bidding process. Some complain that there was collusion.
In terms of improvement tools, mostly the clients need improving their professional preparation in terms of assessing the cost, life cycle cost regarding suppliers. They need the guidelines embedded in legislation, electronic fields in Prozoro, and professional training in terms of certification and procured item. There is certain progress. Unfortunately, there is a quite high number of the surveyed. 12% do not prove this procurement tool that proves that they need the professional training. With regard to multi-criteria approach, procurers are able to use such criteria to certain groups, 23% electric and electronic equipment, 21% is furniture, and 8% and 12% road maintenance and repair. So based on previous information and opinions, one can draw a conclusion that there is a transition from the old type of energy sector to the new model, and new energy strategy declares improvement of energy efficiency and use of power from alternative and renewable sources, which implements new technologies in production, transformation, and processing. In this regard, the sectors of energy and mineral resource use are the priority for Ukraine, but they are regulated by separate procurement legislation, and any survey and recommendations will require more time and effort. So we can draw a conclusion based on previous reports on the programs of Shva Planeta and Environmental Academy. These priority sectors remain unchanged, and the sector areas and goods categories corresponding with the targets of sustainable development and strategies. And based on situational analysis and the first stage of our survey to today's discussion and next presentation, we propose the following categories of goods, works, and services, which have the highest potential for improvement, as Mr. Farid mentioned, and in the framework of this task and project as a whole. So thank you for your attention. I believe I was short. I could expand more, and focus on something else, but thank you that you gave me the opportunity to look in a nutshell what we have done. Thank you, Elena, for presenting this long list of priority sectors and areas related to these goods, works, and services. I believe Svetlana will continue in more detail to present that information. So, Svetlana, the floor is yours. And Elena, if you can share the presentation. So let's continue. As I mentioned about our methodology, which is in line with this UNEP methodology, which we used for survey. We're using step-by-step approach and use a principle of narrowing down in order to focus on the most prioritized categories for SPP, categories of goods, works, and services, taking into consideration the situational analysis feedback which we get from surveying the stakeholders and the previous surveys together with assessment of procurement from the standpoint of what is being procured, for what the budget money mostly spent, and what's the frequency of procurements. These factors also have considerable importance for identifying priorities. At the same time, we are analyzing the availability of regulatory and legal acts which can be used as documents for reference of the client in order to set forth certain sustainability criteria. The complex of those assessments we will see at the end of this webinar which categories of goods, works, and services, which types of goods, works, and services can be considered as the most priority ones. We consider the results of the survey of 2014 by priority sectors of economy, which Elena mentioned. This is the excerpt from our report. Regarding the mostly procured works, goods, and services, we have compared 2019 and 2020. 2021, we don't have yet information, but we assessed the planned expenditures by budget programs, which Elena also mentioned for 2021. How much the government is planning to spend and for what. So for 2019, we can see the mostly procured items, which were called top 15. I would like to mention that the most purchased are power and fuel, energy and fuels. But we are not analyzing those categories because from the point of view of the use of sustainability criteria for those categories, this is very difficult because these are different sources of energy. We have certain requirements to applying or using electric power is regulated by a separate piece of legislation. And with regard to using and encouraging the green energy market, there is a special feed-in tariff based on previous surveys. So we decided to focus purely on other categories of goods. So you can see it on the screen. I won't read it all. Then for 2020, we also incorporated in our survey the general portion of the full volume of procurement and the total number of lots, which demonstrates the frequency of purchases. For example, you can see office equipment, which is somewhere in the middle of this list in terms of volumes of expenditures. But it has the highest frequency of procurement, over 113,000 lots. So this is the mostly frequently purchased goods by various clients and other things. So we incorporated not only the amount of money spent, but and the volumes and also frequency of procurement. How many clients are procuring these categories of goods. And in the same manner, we analyzed services. So we narrowed it down to top 10 services, having analyzed the data in 2019. We can see that, and those which were conducted for environment first cycle of the project, and analyzed it in a more expanded way for 2020. As you can see, services of and maintenance, repair of vehicles, and supervision, construction supervision, waste removal and recycling. This is the most frequently purchased services. But in any way, the vehicle maintenance and catering services are the highest in terms of expected costs in the total expenditures. Top 5 works. The absolute leader is construction. This is also related with the initiative of the President of Ukraine, which is called big construction. You can see considerable difference and an increase in budgetary expenditures for construction. In the first place, it's road construction, but also construction of other infrastructure items of over 65%, and the frequency is very high. That's for construction and repair of roads, and also construction in general civil works. These works are usually related with the routine maintenance or capital repair. All if we are talking about walls and repairs with the focus of energy efficiency, improvement of energy efficiency, indicators of structures, and new construction, social sphere, routine maintenance, and support of water and wastewater and sanitary works. So, having analyzed the volumes of expenditures, budgetary expenditures for procuring works, goods and services for 2019 and 2020, and planned expenditures which coincide with this analysis, we can safely say that in terms of cost, the leader is the road vehicles and pipelines, pipes and equipment, which is necessary to provide for functioning of the system, inventory equipment for cleaning, furniture, mostly that's school furniture, timber, clothes, mostly purchased for the army. But a big share of this is also specialized clothes, which is purchased by companies and corporations, and communication systems, which are purchased for various needs, including military, but not only for them. So the issue of the digitalization requires technical support, and this year and previous years, it required quite a lot of expenditures. In terms of the most frequently purchased services, these are catering and landscaping services, cleanup and waste removal, and quite a lot of expenditures related to cleaning services. More and more public organizations and facilities start outsourcing these services instead of keeping their employees for that, and allocate expenditures for outsourcing these services, hiring appropriate companies. In terms of the most frequently procured works in 2019 and 2020, and the potential for this year, this is the presidential program, big construction. In the first place, this is road construction, construction of other infrastructure facilities, construction and refurbishing of rural health posts or ambulatories and educational establishments. In terms of construction and reconstruction of schools and kindergartens, and this work is actually progressing, and it is at its final phase. It's a GTZ project. There is Annex 6 about public procurement to the directive, the EU directive. So the criteria are being developed, which will be the basis for procurement and the design. It describes certain elements of construction facilities. So this criteria is being handled by GSZ project. In terms of road construction, the criteria were developed for the prices, but in the past few years, the state construction norms were revised and new standards implemented, which Elena mentioned. So this criteria needs a revision in terms of, in general, use of criteria basis and approach of sustainability. The criteria for sustainable public procurement, it's worthwhile to consider all possible criteria which can be applied by the client at this stage of developing qualification requirements and technical specifications, or price criteria. Unfortunately, we have lost this opportunity to use to apply life cycle cost evaluation, but this is temporary. This is temporary because if we talk about implementing Ukraine's legislation in terms of public procurement, we have to approximate to EU Directive 24, assessing of life cycle. We have to improve this basis, and International Standardization Organization proposed a number of standards of various construction facilities, and it provides various methods of life cycle cost. We can implement these documents, but it needs effort. With regard to the preliminary list of identified works and services, all those assessments which Elena mentioned, taking into consideration the volumes of budgetary expenditures for various categories, procurement, and availability of criteria for sustainable public procurement as recommendations which were developed by various projects. We have developed this table which allows to give scores to the and identify the most prioritized goods or services for further development of criteria base for applying approach of sustainable public procurement. The materials of today's presentations will be available in the review of this workshop. And now the Ukrainian and language version of this workshop is being recorded, so everyone who is interested will have an opportunity to study in more detail this information, and it will be provided also in the report based on the results jointly with the UNEP experts. This will be available for everyone in two languages, Ukrainian and English. So what's next? For all categories, we considered also services. In terms of services, we have top services and rocks, which get the highest score in terms of priority. And these are the categories of goods, works, and services at the second place. This is top priority. This includes everything, services and goods and works. But goods are not in this first list, the most priority under number one, but under number two. So these are different categories of goods, works, and services which got less than 20 score points. Then we selected the most prioritized categories of goods, works, and services, and conducted analysis of available criteria for SPP with assessment of the needs for upgrading, taking into consideration the potential and work and activities of other projects. I would like to mention that, for example, the international standard, which which sets the standard for life cycle cost for structures, is now being implemented is being implemented as standard. This is developed by GIZ, and this is an important step to reevaluate, reassess the standard in the construction sector.
We analyzed the green procurement criteria, as Farid mentioned, and I mentioned about this in my previous presentation. So practically everything that we recommend as a priority for further updates of the SPP criteria or the development of new criteria, all that has this foundation that belongs to the GPP criteria, which has been adopted by the European Commission. For some categories of goods which have been prioritized, we don't have any criteria. I'm talking about those that have been approved by the European Commission. They are just posted on the resource of the European Commission that is dedicated to GPP. And then there are criteria which are quite wide-ranging, and they belong to the Eco-Label EU program, and it's a regional program for eco-labeling, and it belongs to the EU. And there are additional sources for reviewing the standards. We are talking about eco-labeling programs for Nordic countries and Germany, Blue Angel, and they can supplement that database which has been identified in the Eco-Label EU program. Speaking about the survey, which we already held before, the survey of the vendors and the procurers, they asked the question about their priorities. What is the most prioritized type of goods and services from the standpoint of criteria for SPP? And then considering their assessment, considering their needs, we identified the following results. And you can see those results on the screen. The survey results are quite voluminous. The research was very significant, and I'm very grateful to everybody who took part, because there were a lot of survey questions. And I was surprised because 248 procurers were able to provide answers to this a very big survey, which makes us very much happy, and it inspires us to do more work in the future. So we are talking about computer and office equipment and catering, food products, and all kinds of construction works. Now, speaking about office equipment or computer equipment, I must tell you that all of the items that are regulated by the eco-design regulation, and this equipment applies to that, all that is now falling under the GIZ scope of work. And they have been developing a certain foundation for the criteria. They are piloting things, so this category is now being addressed. Speaking about food products, speaking about catering, and there still needs to be done a lot of work. Same applies to the construction, specifically construction of transport infrastructure facilities, because GIZ is dealing with that kind of construction. Then road repair, because we cannot forget that apart from the big construction, we have regular maintenance and repair, and many procurers mention that it opens up a lot of opportunities for using SPP criteria for this repair works. Then recycling of waste, specifically hazardous waste and school furniture and plastics, or items made of plastic. So, and we are talking about different equipment that utility services are using generally. So this is what we suggest as a priority for criteria of SPP in line with the EU for Environment project. So based on all of the above, we are talking about road repair criteria, then catering services criteria, catering in schools, catering in other organizations, for other needs, for other purposes, including hospitals and military. Also, that applies for goods. And speaking of goods, we want to focus on the following categories: furniture, flooring, and other items that contain timber, and also plastics. Items that contain plastic, and this area can be improved from the standpoint of chemical safety and content of recycled material. And this applies to both categories. There is a basic standard which is applied for eco-labeling of the first type in Ukraine. But as mentioned before, the standards, they require a revision, substantial revision. And we are talking about new addition of new standards, which will be designed based on the European standards. And they will take into consideration all the objectives which are mentioned in the national policy and the current legislation and specific program measures approved by government. This ends my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Olena Ivanova, please, I'm going to ask you to post the survey form in the chat, and I'm going to ask all of the participants of the seminar to fill it out. This form will be posted on the website of our organization. It will be posted on the website of the Ministry of Environment, and you can just follow the link. Olena, by the way, has just posted this link, and the survey will be open until July 25, because by August 1st, we want our experts to analyze the responses and all the data. So your opinion matters. I'm talking about the opinion of stakeholders in terms of the categories of items which we want to prioritize for the development of new criteria under the existing project. We're talking about goods and services. Other categories which belong to priority areas, considering their potential, They can be supported by other projects. They can be discussed as a second priority with the help of TA projects or the stakeholders, because this project also has its own limitations. We have to develop 2 sets of criteria for sustainable public procurement, and also we have to make sure that they develop criteria for the eco-labeling programs. So we offer this category specifically. So please, this is it. Okay, Svetlana, thank you so much. Thank you for presenting the entire process in detail, the review, the list of goods and services. And as we understand from your presentation, you are offering a short list, right? You're talking about development of criteria for 2 categories of products: construction, repair, and catering, and also development of environmental criteria for plastic products and furniture. Okay, so dear colleagues, if you have any proposals, if you have any comments, if you have any additional recommendations with regard to these categories, please put those recommendations and feedback through the chat. And if we have business representatives with us, if we have representatives of small companies, please share your experience with regard to these categories. Thank you so much. Also, you mentioned that construction was identified as one of the priority categories. And that has to do with the next steps of the project. In this project, we plan to support the procurers so that they could run pilot bids with the use of environmental criteria, sustainability criteria, and so on. And this time we want to focus on more large-scale pilot bids, which can cost up to, thousands of euros per one bid. And this category, construction category, is usually large scale. It involves a lot of funding, and we'd like to see if we could pilot a few bidding processes in these categories. Please share your thoughts, your opinions. And then there was one question, and if one of the presenters can provide an answer to this question, we would be really grateful. This is more about legislation. Olena Maslukivska was asking about the latest changes in the law on public procurement. So she was specifically asking about the life cycle costs and whether it was deleted from the law. Now we are over time, but I think that all of the presentations were very interesting. And we have a last presentation, which is also interesting. And all of the participants, if you can, please stay with us for the last presentation. And I'd like to thank the translators for continuing their work with us. So allow me to invite Galina Buzan, who is the secretary of the technical committee from the Environmental Academy of Postgraduate Education and Administration. That is under the Ministry of Environment, and she will talk about standards, labeling, and conformity. Hello, dear participants. Hello, everyone. I want to talk about standards, labeling, and conformity. That is very important with regard to bidding processes, documentation, and technical specifications, and identification of non-price criteria. Because we are talking about not just justification, but also we are talking about confirmation and what kind of standards we have to look at through the lens of our categories of products which have been selected by the group of experts. But before I start, I want to emphasize, I want to talk about legislation which we use for SPP. Article 23, for instance, Article 29, which refer to labeling and labeling standards. Article 23 says that technical specifications may contain some technological characteristics or features with regard to the procured item. And Article 29 says that evaluation criteria may apply. And they talk about environmental protection measures or social measures, as long as it is related to the procured item. Besides, there is another important nuance. We're talking about confirmation of compliance. So certificates, reports of testing, markings, all that is supposed to be issued by the compliance conformity agency. And this means that agencies are supposed to be accredited in the National Accreditation Agency. We have submitted a request to the Ministry of Economic Development because we wanted to clarify how this conformity assessment can be done. Because with considering the current legislation, as of today in Ukraine, it can only be done through the accreditation in the National Accreditation Agency of Ukraine. The accreditation authorities, they can only confirm their competence through that agency. All other agencies of conformity assessment, which are not accredited by the National Agency of Accreditation, their documents cannot be considered legitimate, and they cannot be accepted as a verification, as a result of verification. So the documents which are offered by the conformity assessment agencies, they look like this, and they bear specific logos. We're talking about certificates or test reports or any other documents. They look like this. This is the logo of the National Accreditation Agency of Ukraine, and also a label with the registration number of the Conformity Assessment Agency and the standard according to which they conducted the assessment. There are two standards which are used for accreditation. 1725 and 17065. So they apply to services, to goods. So the standard ISO 17025, it applies to the general requirements of labs, testing labs, for instance. So we are talking about documents which have to have reference to the standards like 17065. If we are talking about the document issued by the lab, then it has to have this label, 17025. We had cases when people got confused between these two documents, between these two certificates. And special attention requires the labeling, which is available for market operators in Ukraine. And we have a quick list of things that are most widespread, that are most common, and they are available in our market for market operators. There are some groups of labeling. And this process is used globally and in Europe. So we have labeling of type 1 national, and they represent also labeling from other countries. And all of them can be found on different products in Ukrainian market, domestic, made, or international. Also, organic labeling that belongs mostly to cosmetics and food products. And then environmental characteristics. With specific indicators for specific types of product. So environmental features for textile products, for instance, FSC, labeling, which we can find on timber products or wood products. And it says that, or it means that the manufacturer is using timber sourced in an environmentally friendly way. Then there are labels that show environmentally friendly energy consumption. It's called Energy Star, for instance. That's what we use. Some specific features, specific characteristics for specific kinds of products. Then there is the type 2 environmental or eco labeling. And it's about self-declaration. This is where a label shows some specific environmental characteristics or its packaging of any product. And there are different interpretations of the mode use. Strip. And it means that it's been either this item was recycled or it can be recycled. It's recyclable. And also they talk about biodegradation and other kinds of features of the product. And also some of the labeling shows the contents of greenhouse gases, and all that belongs to self-declaration process. And it applies to ISO 14021 standard. Then there is another group of markings, the so-called energy marking. And it's about the energy class of the product. The higher the class, the better the product. Then this kind of declarations, they are not used in Ukraine, but we hope that this practice, which is widely spread in Europe, it will arrive to Ukraine at some point. And then there are social labels, fair trade, and then this label shows that it's not been animal tested. And then vegan products, they have labeled like this, and then many more. Each and every label has a certain reference to a certain standard, in line of which the producer received the right to label his or her products like this. And that needs to be considered, especially during procurement, because during procurement you have to understand which standards this product is in compliance with. And now we are moving to the priority items. And we will talk about different aspects of environmental impacts and what we have to pay attention to during design of technical specifications and non-pricing criteria. Lilia Laktionova, in the beginning of the webinar, said that for every procured item, we have to consider the entire life cycle, starting from production of raw material and its use, and also identification of impacts, most serious impacts, and then stimulation of minimizing those impacts through different criteria prescribed in the bidding process. So road repair, for instance, here we have several aspects. And one of them is about the use of recycled materials during construction. We're talking about use of ash and other waste, which is a huge problem for Ukraine. The amount of ash in Ukraine covers more than 5% of Ukraine's territory. It's a huge number. And in 2019, they issued a CMU resolution which mandates to use recycled materials and ash during road construction with the content of up to 30%. Now, speaking about justification of the cost of the use of ash in construction, we made our calculations and we saw that the average cost per ton for gravel is 100 hryvnia more expensive than cinder from the blast furnace, which can replace regular gravel. So cinder needs to be prepared before use and it needs to be properly transported. And there is a problem with logistics, with transportation, because those huge deposits of cinder and ash, they are located in some specific territories where production is heavy and it needs to be transported all across Ukraine. So you have to consider logistics so that we will not make this procurement process way more expensive than procurement of natural materials. Then there is another important aspect. It's energy saving during installation of lights and lighting along the roads. When they repair roads, when they construct roads, there is a plan to use LED lamps, energy saving lamps. And the cost of one lamp, energy efficient lamp, is 10 times more expensive, but it will help you save 10 times more than the regular lamp. So we have to focus on the life cycle cost of a specific item, and this is where we can have significant economy. So we recommend to use this criteria as well and use LED lamps for during road construction. Better construction materials for road repair and road construction. That applies also to construction materials such as different mixtures, different concretes, which are used during the so-called road pie making. And we're talking about different national standards, construction standards, which should comply with this new environmental criteria They have to comply with the environmental standards. They have to be properly labeled. These kind of products will be, of course, more expensive. And we now have an average price for non-certified products. For certified products, it's 45 hryvnia, non-certified 24.5. But environmental standards, which are used for production of eco-labeled concrete, they are much better. And they correspond to multiple environmental criteria, and they correspond to all the life cycle cost requirements.
Considerably reduce impact on environment. It includes minimizing energy use and minimizing of waste and waste management. One more important aspect regarding the requirements to environmentally friendly concrete and any other products certified according to the ISO 14024. Now there is a situation where two standards, 14024 in the and the 2002 and 14024 2018 because there was a transition period for the new version of ISO 14024 was implemented because the assessment of compliance agencies had to get adjusted, and certification bodies which are present in Ukraine also had to pass this transition period to get certificates for the new version of ISO 14024. So this situation is currently exists and it will persist till 1st of January 2022. Elena, can you please expedite your presentation, please? We shouldn't focus in that much detail on the standards because we're short of time. So let's come back to the categories of products and consider the next aspect. It is construction and rehabilitation of roads, achievement of standards ISO 14001. Any systems of environmental management, we need to bear in mind that it's management of production and not related to the products, but directly. But if we are considering goods, goods and services, it's worthwhile to apply this requirement. This won't have direct impact on the product, but it will provide a confirmation that during providing the service, the supplier complied with all environmental requirements in terms of waste management and resource management and so on. The next category, the next criteria which we use for construction and maintenance of roads is compliance with the measures to protect environment. And here EIA has to be conducted for certain activities, and that should be required if that facility is subject to that law. There is a technical committee. Last year they adopted two standards. It's EIA for transport structures. The standards can be used to set criteria for the facilities which are not subject for which there are no EIA reports. But if you want to review that and apply those requirements, you can use DS2 9060. That's assessment of impact of transport structures and facilities, criteria of assessment, then requirements to permits that a priori we have to have, and management of environmental aspects during construction and compliance with the nature protection legislation. So the next category is catering services and food products. There are three main areas or groups of criteria which can use. First of all, the most widely used is the requirements to natural foods, a system of certification of natural products which we have in Ukraine. We can see this sign on the slide. This is the sign which is used for natural foods. And also, if we compare the amounts which will be spent for foodstuffs, we'll see that this is not much more expensive. But if you are procuring this for children, for kindergarten, for schools, there are a lot of norms which will help to feed children with better quality products. There are also catering services and foodstuffs which can be procured, those which were certified as organic and have organic marking. But we should be mindful that these foods are better, more healthy, and better for children, but the price will be much higher. But there are certain categories which are not that much more expensive. For example, the noodles and grits, the price won't be that much higher, but it will be much more healthy for our children if those are procured. Also, we can mention the requirements about the marking of the first type when environmental products are purchased or catering services are purchased. This complying with ISO 21024 and to have marking of the first type. Sometimes practice shows that sometimes there is no difference between the products which complies with the government requirements and those which have improved environmental characteristics. So among all systems of certification, probably this system would be the best if we're talking about catering. One more important aspect for catering is saving of resources. During procurement, you should ask a question about the equipment of class class A, or even A3 plus equipment that's for food preparation, for storage in refrigerators, and so on. In addition, for catering, the disposable utensils are used, but more environmentally friendly will be used glassware or ceramic or porcelain. If it's possible, it's better to take this path. This will reduce the costs and reduce very much the waste. In terms of waste, it would be good to specify the requirements for managing waste when providing catering services. Just one minute left, Galina, for you. That's in terms of procurement of catering and foodstuffs. The HASP system. We also mentioned that there are two categories for which environmental requirements are developed for certification according to ISO standard. This includes flooring, furniture, and other timber materials. I will just go through the aspects which need attention. This is availability of marking for wood products and marking for plastic, which shows which can be separately collected for recycling, and for plastic products, the main requirements which are envisaged. This is availability of plastic products, system of environmental marking and declarations. This is compliance with ISO 14024, which is now being revised. Standards in the environmental criteria. Now there is a working group working on the revision of the standard. Using this opportunity, I invite everyone willing to get engaged in that working group, and we will have the new version of environmental criteria for plastic goods and the timber goods. This environmental criteria can be used as criteria for sustainable public procurement. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this information was useful for you. Please ask questions if there are any. Thank you, Galina. Of course, this was very useful and interesting information. I'd like to mention as the issue of environmental marking requires more time and attention. We decided with the Life Planet to arrange a separate workshop dedicated to environmental marking. But thank you for this comprehensive presentation on standards of marking and compliance with the quality requirements on those priority goods, which are defined by our experts for future development of criteria for sustainability. Svetlana, do we have 2-3 minutes for Q&As, or we'll continue? We will continue as long as we need. The interpreters are here. In Zoom, the time is not limited. It's very important if there are questions to hear those, because today's workshop is in essence the final one. And based on the results of today's discussion of priority categories, and based on the results of survey, which has already started, we will finalize our research. And this is very important. So, colleagues, if you have any remarks, questions, proposals, please raise your hand, and we have several minutes for Q&A and sharing your opinions.
Чи можна також, Світлано, в чаті
Svetlana, in can we share the presentations in chat? There was a request to share presentations, or you will send it later by email. We will make a review based on the results of today's workshop and all video recording of all presentations. All participants are registered, and we will send it circulated via emails. Over 200 participants are registered, but some are working from the same computer. That's why we see less people here in Zoom. But in anyways, this information will be publicly available. We'll convert all of those in PDF. And they're quite big, those presentations. That's why we won't be able to share some of them in chat. So probably by tomorrow, we will send this information. Thank you. And I'll remind you once again that Elena shared the link to the survey. First of all, we invite you to participate in that survey, and we would like to thank those who have already participated in the survey. And once again, should any of you have questions, please ask those now. Otherwise, we will wrap up on that. Svetlana, as we can see, there are no questions. Maybe Farid can comment. He's as very recognized, well-recognized expert and in this sphere. Maybe his impressions of this workshop, maybe some of his reflections on what was presented today. So Farid, please, the floor is yours.
Так, він має деякі технічні.
Так, ну добре, тоді ми це все будемо з'ясовувати в робочому порядку.
Okay, we will solve it in our routine procedures. I can see that Farid cannot connect. Has some technical difficulties. So I think we can finalize, Lesya. And in conclusion, I would like to remind once again, we are planning a number of workshops. This was the first one under our project to present the list of priority goods,
Hello?
works, and services.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, had a little technical problem. Really, it's been long, but it's been really very interesting, and I'm really impressed by the quality of the work. Now you're getting into the reality of sustainable procurement. You're getting into the product. You're getting into definition of criteria, means of verification, labeling, standards, etc. So we're getting into the core of sustainable procurement. So I really would like to congratulate all the team for the great work. I think that we have to look at next steps, and what is missing is really a dialogue with the suppliers, with the manufacturers, on defining precisely, agreeing on the criteria. It's one thing to propose criteria, it's another thing of agreeing with the market on where really we put the needle, and what is the exact specification. Do we use the word criteria or not? Is the market mature enough to use a word criteria? Who is interested in the among contracting authorities to move forward on this? So we really have to go towards this this dialogue, and we had the chance of establishing with the World Bank this consultative group of stakeholders. So I really look forward to the next steps when we can get more precise. But you did a fantastic job, and I think you deserve some rest now in the summer, and then we can take it up again in the fall. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Дякую, Фарід.
Дякую.
Декілька слів про наші плани. Можливо, Світлана хоче доповнити. Отже,
Thank you, Farid. Maybe a few words about our next steps. Thank you, Farid. We will continue this dialogue. We are continuing it, and it actually had impact very much on the process of prioritization. So we will continue when working on the specific criteria. No doubt we will conduct consultations with the market, with the clients to discuss the criteria basis. And I hope jointly with UNEP we will conduct a number of workshops dedicated to criteria developed for the priority types of goods, works, and services, and on environmental marking. This is our joint work, which is ahead of us. And thank you, Lesa. And for the next steps under this project, we believe that our experts successfully accomplished this task of identifying priority goods, works, and services. Next step, as Svetlana mentioned, will be development of criteria. Next, in parallel, we are working with the Prozoro team in order to technically improve the possibilities to use non-price criteria on electronic portal of procurement. And training, specialized training is envisaged for those who use Prozoro platform, and the large-scale awareness campaign will be supported. Trainings, surveys, discussions with all stakeholders, including for piloting tenders using the sustainable procurement criteria. We anticipate 10, 12 tenders with a budget not less than 100,000 euros. We'll see if it will be possible under the project, and other events of which we will inform you. On my part, I would like to thank all those who participated in this workshop, and to thank our partners, the All Ukrainian Network Live Planet, for implementing these activities, for organizing today's workshop. And we are happy that we had the representatives of the key ministries, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Economy, also a representative of the Parliamentary Committee. And in their speeches, they confirmed the focus on developing SPP and policy on environmental marking. And we are glad that the representative office of EU in Ukraine was present here, who help us financially, and also other countries in promoting SPPs. I thank you everyone for attention. Wish you a good day, and thanks to our interpreters for wonderful support.
До побачення.
Thank you, and see you next time.